Hello and welcome to PLZ Soccer as we continue our build-up to Scotland taking on Switzerland in their second game of Euro 2024. I'm delighted to say I'm joined today by Swiss football expert Craig King. Craig, it's a pleasure to have you here. These two sides, they're coming into this on very differing form. Switzerland obviously getting a win in their opening game despite Scotland losing 5-1 to Germany in that opener on Friday night. Is this how you've seen this group opening up?
I think this game coming up is always going to be the important game, regardless of what happened elsewhere. I think for Switzerland, it's a bonus that they managed to get those 3 points, and it sets them up really nicely for this game now against Scotland. If they can get even a point, a win would pretty much see them through, depending on the result in the other game. But a point would set them up very nicely as well. So Switzerland are going into this one with having taken a lot of pressure off themselves, having beat Hungary in that first game. So, yeah, I think it all comes down to this game for both teams, more so Scotland, just because of the pressure they've put themselves under after their performance against Germany. But I think this one will have a lot of answers for us, both in terms of the team's performances and the qualification as well.
What has been the reaction rate like amongst the Swiss public to that opening win, and what are their mood going into this game against Scotland? Are they confident they can get the win?
I think there's a lot of relief, to be quite honest, because you talked about Scotland and Switzerland in different form. That's something that's kind of been the case it's kind of mirrored each other since the qualifying began. Switzerland weren't too good in qualifying. They were in a kind of weak group, whereas Scotland played very well in a qualifying group. And then after the qualifiers ended, Switzerland seemed to have picked up form again and Scotland have kind of dipped. So, yeah, the form is very different. And Switzerland had improved in those friendly matches, the warm-up games. They won away in Ireland, they drew with Denmark, and they were starting to kind of show themselves to be the team they were in the previous tournaments. In qualifying, they conceded a lot of goals and they struggled and made a really hard work of the group. So I think there is a lot of relief that they then took those better performances back into the major tournament football and showed that they were going to play like we know they can. And yeah, that performance really kind of eased some nerves, I think. And to be honest, not from my point of view, but from people that I speak to in Swiss football, they kind of viewed Scotland as one of the weaker teams in the group. And the performance they displayed against Hungary and Scotland's performance against Germany will probably only help to boost the confidence of Switzerland before this game. I think a lot of Swiss fans will be expecting the win, expecting the point at the very least, and I don't think they'll feel too threatened by Scotland, to be honest, which again shouldn't really underestimate Scotland, but you can probably see why there's a lot of confidence after Friday night.
Do you think there's a lot of belief now amongst the Swiss public that they can go on and make the knockout stages?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the last 5 tournaments in a row, Switzerland have always qualified as their 6th, and they've always got out the group stage, and they've always came up into that knockout round and came up short until they played France at the last Euros, and they reached the quarter-final for the first time since 1958. So it's all been a kind of building process for Switzerland, and the fact that they've been able to kind of hit that next level at the last Euros and again at the World Cup last time out, they were able to at least get to the last 16. They're consistently hitting that target. So every tournament, they're expected to at least get there. And again, there was some kind of doubts because of the qualifying campaign. Maybe they peaked against France a few years ago. They lost heavily to Portugal in that World Cup. So maybe this was kind of them coming back down the other side. But that performance against Hungary kind of showed that they can still do it at this level. All those experienced players, they know how to get it done. So there is a lot of confidence now that they'll get out of the group stage again, especially with the third place option there as well. It kind of takes pressure off that way too. So I'd be surprised if Switzerland don't get out of the group now, and there would be a lot of disappointment between the Swiss public if they don't either, because they've put themselves in such a good position now.
You spoke about the experienced players there, one of them, Granit Xhaka. He was so instrumental in that win the other day. Is containing him a real key point for Steve Clarke's men to take down this Swiss side?
Yeah, definitely. I think Xhaka's shown over the last decade or so that he's been in this team. He's been at every major tournament since 2014 with Switzerland. And even when his club form hasn't been particularly good at maybe Arsenal, he was still a major part of the team. And now he's coming into this tournament having had such a fantastic season against Leverkusen, with Leverkusen, sorry. And yeah, he's just full of confidence, and he showed that again in that first game. You know, everything went through him. Michel Aebischer had such a good game for Switzerland. He assisted and scored, but he still didn't get player of the match because Xhaka was just so composed and everything kind of came through him. He just was the engine of the team pretty much. And he's one that Scotland will have to watch for sure, but then there's other weapons in there like Xherdan Shaqiri, who didn't even play against Hungary. So it's a good position for Switzerland to find themselves in. They've got a lot of players there that are either in the team already or can come off the bench and really affect the game.
One of the players that certainly did make an impact at the weekend, Kwadwo Duah. His is quite an incredible story. Only his second cap, I believe, scoring that opener. Was it a surprise to you that he started?
Yeah, I didn't want him to start, to be honest. I was wondering what the manager was doing and why they would start him over Zeki Amdouni, who's scored, I think it's 7 in his first 15 caps and is the kind of striker that Switzerland have been missing for a long time. So when his name was on the team sheet ahead of Amdouni, because of he'd only played one game, you know, against Estonia in the warm-up friendly, and he didn't do too well. He played 45 minutes and then he kind of he went off and he didn't really impact the game. So I thought it was a very odd choice for him to start, but he took the opportunity with both hands, you know. And again, I mentioned Michel Aebischer. He was another one who was in ahead of Xherdan Shaqiri, which was very surprising, but he assisted the opening goal and he scored himself as well. And that was both players scoring their first international goal in a major tournament. So yeah, that's pretty unique as well. But I think that's just another kind of confidence boost for Switzerland, that they can now call on Kwadwo Duah, because he was maybe not someone that was on the radar of anyone. You know, he had such a good season in Bulgaria, but I don't think many people would have named him in the squad before Yakin did, you know. So it's a good option to have, and it'll be interesting to see what the manager does going forward now, because he's kind of giving himself a headache alongside Amdouni there to decide which striker he wants to go with.
Everyone here in Scotland is looking for a little bit of optimism after that thumping defeat in the opening game. Is there anywhere against this Swiss side where Steve Clarke can get joy?
I still think there's question marks defensively and mentality-wise. I think the game against Hungary was such a kind of relief, because that first half they controlled it and they showed the Switzerland that has been there for every major tournament since 2014. But the big thing in qualifying for Switzerland was that second half they conceded every single one of their 11 goals in qualifying in the second half. They conceded in 5 games after 80 minutes. They dropped points consistently as a result of that. And that became a mentality issue throughout that qualifying campaign. And then again against Hungary, they concede in the second half 2-1, and it suddenly gets a bit nervy again. And yes, they saw it out, but Hungary had chances before they scored and 1 or 2 chances after they scored as well, which is a worry going forward. Switzerland did manage to get the third goal and did manage to see it out, but it was there was the hallmarks of that qualifying campaign there, and there was that kind of worry again that they were doing the same things they'd done during qualifying. So Scotland can definitely get at this Swiss defence. I don't think it's watertight by any means. They've only kept 2 or 3 clean sheets in all those major tournaments that they've played in over the last decade. So Scotland can get at the defence, but again, it comes down to whether Scotland have that firepower, which is something Switzerland have struggled with themselves over those last tournaments too.
And Craig, just before you go, if I can push you for a score prediction.
Yeah, so I'm going to go for 1 each. That was my thoughts before a ball was kicked at the tournament, and I don't want what happened on Friday and Saturday to kind of sway me too much. I'm just going to stick with that. I'm sitting on the fence, which seems like the most obvious thing that I would do, but yeah, I'm going to go 1 each.
Brilliant, Craig. Thanks very much for joining us here on PLZ Soccer.